The porcelain plate shattered before anyone understood what was happening, fragments scattering across the polished marble floor like pieces of a broken promise. The billionaire, Lucas Marin, glared at the trembling waitress, his voice rising above the soft jazz spilling from hidden speakers. And in that moment, under those chandeliers, between tables lined with silk napkins and people who pretended they didn't hear, she lifted her head, steadied her breath, and said one sentence that froze the entire restaurant. A sentence that carried the weight of truth, grief, and something far deeper than pride. Before we continue, if you believe kindness still matters in this world, if you believe people deserve second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Diaries. It truly helps the stories reach more hearts. The story began long before that fragile plate shattered and long before Lucas Marin, one of the wealthiest men in the state, walked into the restaurant with a storm in his chest. Lucas wasn't always harsh. Years ago, he had been gentle, patient, and even hopeful. But losing his wife to a sudden illness had warped something inside him, leaving him colder, sharper, and endlessly restless. Work became his refuge, wealth became his shield, and power became the only language he understood. To the world, he was a titan. To himself, he was a man running from his own memories. On the other side of the story stood the waitress, Mia Hale, a 24-year-old woman who carried exhaustion beneath her eyes, hope inside her chest, and pain behind her carefully practiced smile. She was new to the city, new to the restaurant, and new to a life where every shift brought her closer to a dream she barely believed she had the right to chase. She worked double shifts not because she wanted the money, but because she needed it, because her younger brother, Liam, lay in a hospital bed miles away, waiting for a treatment insurance wouldn't cover. Every tip mattered. Every minute mattered. Every mistake felt like a disaster waiting to happen. The night Lucas walked in, Mia was already on the edge of breaking. Her manager had yelled at her twice for moving too slowly. A customer had complained about her energy. And she had just received a text from the hospital saying Liam had taken a bad turn. But she couldn't answer, couldn't call, couldn't leave. Rent was due tomorrow, and missing even a shift meant losing the tiny room she rented. Lucas entered the restaurant like a winter wind, cold, sharp, and impossible to ignore. His presence drew the eyes of everyone, though none dared stare too long. He looked exhausted, worn, and irritated, though no one knew that minutes before stepping inside, he had received news that his company was facing a lawsuit that could stain his reputation. Pressure throbbed behind his temples, and anger simmered beneath his ribs. When Mia approached his table, hands trembling beneath the weight of a tray holding an expensive entree, her mind was a spinning storm of worry. She miscalculated by only a fraction, but the movement was enough. The plate tilted, slipped, and before she could correct herself, it shattered at his feet. Gasps rustled across the room. The jazz music seemed to hush itself. And Lucas, tight-jawed, seething, and unaware of the humanity in front of him, let his rage erupt. He raised his voice, berating her in front of every pair of watching eyes. He spoke of incompetence, irresponsibility, and the standard he expected. He demanded to know how someone like her had been hired. His anger was loud, sharp, and filled with frustration that had nothing to do with her. Mia stood frozen, feeling the humiliation rise like fire in her throat. People stared but did nothing. Her manager hid behind the counter. Her knees trembled. Her chest ached. She wanted to apologize. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear. But instead, something inside her shifted. Some deep, quiet strength that pain had carved into her finally rose. And she said the sentence that silenced every fork, every whisper, every breath in the restaurant. She said, in a soft, steady voice, "Sir. I'm doing my best while trying to keep my brother alive." Silence, heavy, thick, and absolute, settled over the room. Lucas blinked. The anger flickered. His next breath faltered. Mia hadn't meant to say it. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't a plea. It was the truth leaking out of a breaking heart. And as the words hung in the air, she wished she could pull them back, wished she hadn't revealed the most vulnerable part of her life to a room full of strangers. But it was too late. Lucas stared at her, and for the first time that night, he truly saw her. Not just a waitress. Not just a mistake. But a human being balancing the weight of the world on trembling shoulders. Something inside him cracked. The harshness in his face melted into an expression of stunned regret, and he felt suddenly small. He didn't know why her words hit him so deeply, but they echoed inside him, reminding him of the nights he had spent in hospital corridors, clutching his wife's cold hand, whispering promises he couldn't keep. He remembered helplessness. He remembered fear. He remembered what it felt like to fight for someone you loved while the world moved on without mercy. The restaurant remained silent as Mia knelt to pick up the broken pieces, her hands shaking not from fear now but from the release of holding everything inside too long. A couple at a nearby table wiped their eyes. A man lowered his phone, ashamed for recording. Even the manager stepped out, speechless. Lucas, overwhelmed by a sudden wave of guilt, lowered himself to the floor beside her. He reached for a shard at the same time she did, and for a moment their hands brushed. She pulled back quickly, unsure, but Lucas didn't speak. His throat felt too tight. He simply helped her gather the broken porcelain into her trembling palms. When they both stood, he looked at her like a man who had just confronted the worst parts of himself. Mia expected another wave of criticism, another remark, another demand. But instead, Lucas quietly excused himself from the restaurant, leaving a heavy silence behind. Mia felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on her, but she forced herself to keep going. She finished her shift with a heart that felt ripped open, and when she finally reached the staff room, she allowed herself to break. She cried until her chest ached, until the world blurred, until grief and stress tangled together. She didn't know that outside, Lucas sat in his car, staring at his trembling hands. He had spent years building walls so high that no one could climb them. But one sentence from a stranger had cut through everything. He remembered his wife telling him once that kindness was not a luxury, it was a responsibility. And he realized he had forgotten that truth. The next morning, Mia woke up to 3 missed calls from the hospital. She panicked, fearing the worst, only to be told that her brother was stable. The relief made her knees buckle. But there was something else. Her manager had asked her to come in early. She feared she was being fired. When she arrived, every employee stared at her with expressions she couldn't decipher. Her manager motioned her toward the main dining area. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside. There, waiting at a table, was Lucas Marin. But not the version from the night before. Not the cold billionaire with sharp eyes and harsher words. This Lucas looked human. Nervous. Regretful. Humble. He had asked to speak to her privately, but the manager insisted on being present. Mia stood stiffly, ready for anything, another scolding, another demand, even a dismissal. But instead, Lucas apologized. Not quickly. Not lightly. He apologized deeply, sincerely, like a man who understood the cost of hurting someone already fighting for their life. He told her he had no right to raise his voice, no right to judge her, no right to make her night harder than it already was. He confessed he had been drowning in stress and grief, but that was no excuse. He acknowledged her struggle, her strength, and her bravery. Mia didn't know how to respond. She felt vulnerable, exposed, and unsure if she should forgive him. But something in his eyes, something broken and sincere, softened her heart. Lucas then handed her an envelope. She didn't want to open it at first, fearing it was payment meant to silence her pain. But when she finally unfolded the papers inside, tears welled in her eyes. It was the approval letter for her brother's full medical treatment, already paid in advance. Paid by Lucas Marin. Mia's breath caught. The room spun. She looked at him in disbelief, but Lucas didn't look proud or pleased.